Welcome, everyone, uh, on this beautiful Wednesday, I guess, afternoon for some of us on the left coast and evening for those of you on the East Coast. And Nikit, I don't know if you're still in Kenya, but some crazy time in the middle of the morning. So welcome, everyone. A quick update before we get into introducing everyone. We've recently updated the PGA task force documents, the ones that are working in a non-studio environment. And these are the guidelines for safety planning for your productions during COVID. There's a bit of new info in there, as much as we have right now on vaccinations and how they may affect our protocols, and more specific details on zones and other changes from the industry white papers. And for those of you who haven't seen these documents, they're written specifically from the producer's perspective in hopefully plainer English for the ease of implementation in a practical sense. So if you're working in a non-studio environment, this is a really great roadmap really for you to set up your production. And these documents, I'll say this every time, are really only possible with the great work of many people, and especially with input from the AP Council, who's given us numerous comments and documents regarding, in particular, the unscripted protocols and the indie protocols and suggestions for the same. So today we have a treat for you. This is an AP Council generated panel of amazing working producers working during the pandemic. And we have three today who are going to be here to answer questions for us. And I want to have a special thank you to Jillian Stein, Melissa Friedman, Megan Jordan, and Lynn Hilden, who helped put this whole thing together. So let me get started with the intros. Then we'll give they'll each give us an idea of the specific project that they're working on, that they were shooting during the pandemic, and maybe something they learned from it. Then we'll start asking questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from you. And I think, Diana, there's a Q&A section of this that you guys can throw your questions in, and I'll try to get them as soon as you guys send them up. So in alphabetical order, we have Nikit Doshi, Jackie Stolfi, and David White. So let me start with Nikit. Nikit was born in Kenya, and he's lived in Australia, India, and Los Angeles, where he graduated from AFI, the MFA producing program. He began his career working on two Bollywood films, Om Shanti Om and Sorry Bahai, and has since held positions at Captivate Entertainment, which has done the Jason Bourne series, MGM Studios, where they did James Bond, and Pathé International, where they did Slumdog Millionaire, and on season 7 of AMC's Mad Men. Nikit also co-founded in 2015, is it Alpass?
That's correct.
Okay, Entertainment, which is the co-financer of, I haven't seen this, I'm dying to see it now, The Journey is a Destination, based on the life of slain journalist Dan Eldon, was produced with Marty Katz and Voltage Pictures, and directed by Bronwyn Hughes, who did Forces of Nature, and written by Jan Sardi, who did The Notebook. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2016 and is currently on Netflix. I am writing that down. His most recent feature, Brute Force, starring Tyler Posey and Patricia Velasquez, completed production in October and is currently in post-production. Aside from his work in film, Nikit also works as a wildlife photographer in East Africa and currently spends his time between LA and Kenya, where, by the way, one of my goddaughters lives, so we need to exchange our Kenya information. So welcome, Nikit. And then we have Jackie Stolfi. Jackie is an Emmy-nominated New York City-based producer, having produced in nearly every format: film, television, new media. Whether it's single camera or multi-camera, short form or long, Jackie's put together numerous pilots, series, TV series, web series, indie features, and fiction, nonfiction, animation, and live action. That's a lot. Wow. Recent projects include Adult Swim's charmer Joe Para Talks With You, Apple TV Plus's and Sesame's workshop Helpsters, and a global documentary series on mental health. At the onset of the pandemic, Jackie and her production team devised and implemented a COVID-19 plan that kept hundreds of individuals employed and shooting safely around the globe on a verite documentary series. Can't wait to hear about that. Welcome. And David White. In the time of COVID, David Niles White found himself to be a useful unicorn, a producer for most of his adult life. He's also been part of the trauma team at the UCLA Medical Emergency Department for nearly 18 years. That's a nice thing to do on the side. This unique combination of production skills and medical experience has made him a helpful resource, keeping cast and crew safe through the production restart last year and continuing into this year. David's currently the COVID-19 health and safety consultant for one of Sony Picture Television's one-hour dramas that plays on one of the largest streaming portals. Starting production in its third season, the cast and crew, get this, ranges from 400 to 600 people and is about to move into its fifth soundstage on the Sony lot. So welcome, David. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for your time. You're an amazing group of producers, and I feel like we have some great representations from all facets of the world of production. So we're happy to have you. So what I'd love to do to start out is if you could just tell us a little bit about the project you worked on or that you're currently working on during the pandemic, maybe how big it is, what the format is, scripted, unscripted, the size of the crew, and how you dealt with any positive tests that came through on your productions. So Nikit, you want to start?
Sure thing. Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction, and it's lovely to be here and be able to participate in this. The film that I was a producer on late last year was called Brute Force, and Brute Force is a noir thriller that explores aspects of a missing person case among the vineyards in the central coast of California. And so it's an indie feature that we shot in September, October last year, just at that point where California was starting to open up and things were looking quite positive. And thankfully, we were able to wrap up and finish production just as things sort of turned the other way. We had about a 5 to 6 week schedule up all across San Luis Obispo down to Paso Robles and all the way along that central coast. We were quite fortunate in that we didn't end up with any positive cases throughout production, and it was yeah, absolutely. And so everyone kind of got up there and was together in a pod throughout that process, and got back safely to LA and elsewhere afterwards as well. It was a relatively small crew. We had a total crew size of about 35 or so people, and so everyone was certainly working quite lean and very, very contained in the way that we approached the entire process. But for a film at our budget and at our level, I think it was the only way to really make it work and keep things as tight and manageable as possible.
And did you bubble on your crew size or on your crew? Did you have everyone staying in the same place, or were people going back, since it was in Los Angeles, to their homes? How did that work?
No, so we were sort of very clear from the beginning that unfortunately for all of the weekends and the days off, there was no travel back and forth unless it was an absolute emergency. Everyone was sort of together at the same hotel. We essentially took over a good chunk of the property and had ourselves separated and kind of in a bubble together. And of course, everyone was tested before coming up to San Luis Obispo, and then tested regularly and in line with the various guidelines at the time. Throughout that process. So we were very lucky in that our entire crew got along very well, and we weren't sort of completely fed up of each other after 8 weeks of seeing the same people every day. But in a sense, I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits of that entire way of working, as well, is that it did allow people to get very close, and it felt like a real family, I guess, working through this kind of thing.
Great, thank you, Nikit. Jackie.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Lori, for pulling this together and continuing the panel series. I'm really excited that we're doing this again. So I was on a series. It was a nonfiction documentary series that was shooting when COVID struck, and we figured out a way to keep it going throughout the year. We had probably somewhere between 30 and 35 shoots all over the world, mostly in the US, but we did shoot in probably 5 to 7 other countries as well. And our crews varied in terms of size. So probably the smallest was 10 people and the largest was 50. And they also varied in terms of how many cameras we used. So some shoots were single camera, and other shoots, I think the biggest one we had were six camera shoot. So yeah, every shoot was different, and we had to approach it as a different shoot every time we went out there. And we traveled people pretty much on every shoot that we could. And then some shoots where the metrics weren't in our favor, we had to hire all local. But yeah, we kept it going. We started shooting again, obviously got shut down in March, started shooting again in July and kept going through January. So yeah.
Wow. So during the peak when we kind of started getting really bad. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Amazing. And how, you might have said it, but how big was your team?
The production team,
Mm-hmm.
I think so at the beginning we were 4 people, and then I beefed it up. I had to. By the end, we hired more people, maybe went up to 7, excluding our health and safety supervisor. But we had one that was with us full time the whole time, and then we picked up others as we went and needed to.
Great.
But yes. Oh, and to answer your question about how we dealt with positive tests,
Mhm.
so we were so safe, nobody ever contracted COVID on a set, but we did have a few canceled shoots where talent, because we were shooting with, regular people, participants, if they tested positive, we had some cases we just couldn't shoot, right? So we shut down shoots a few times. And then if crew members had tested positive before we shot, which they had, we just used our backups because we always tested backups for every key for every single shoot.
That's
And
a great note for everyone to keep, like have backups in place, especially for your critical members. That's fantastic. Good. And David.
Hi there. Thanks again for putting this together. Jillian, our mutual friend who introduced me to this panel, called me, I think it was late July of last year, and because she knows that I'm this rare duck that bounces back and forth between production and the emergency medicine world. And she said, so have you heard about this position called COVID safety supervisor? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She goes, yeah, hang on, your phone's gonna ring. I'm like, okay, well, thanks for the call. Then Sony, then Disney, then NBC, then all of a sudden the phone started ringing. The producer of the show that I'm on now called and said, we are going to be the first show back on the Sony lot. And would you come and help? No pressure. And I got here and it was like a ghost town except for our show. And so we were the first Sony show back on. And so the people from the DGA, the people from SAG, the people from IA, everyone wanted to see what we were doing and how we were doing it, and to make sure that we were sticking with the guidelines that they had set up. Sony, in the meantime, had begun to build their guidelines. I just got the most recent version of our guidelines. It's version 18. It is 94 pages long. That's the one for what I do. There's also one for cast and crew. That's a mere 50 pages long and on version 4. So we're updating these constantly. We have a Microsoft Teams meeting every Tuesday with all of my counterparts throughout the Sony universe, literally all over the world. And we all get together and talk through what's going on in our lives and what protocols that we may need to institute and what has been updated. And things change pretty much every week. There's something new. I think this past week, just as you were mentioning, talking about what are we going to do as vaccinations start to happen. The week before that, it was how do we handle previous positive cases, because a lot of those are starting to show up. And so we now have protocols for all of those. And as far as, size of the cast and crew, as you mentioned in the intro, we are an hour drama on one of the largest of the streaming portals. And as we begin season 3, we start to shoot a little later on in March. It'll be probably between 400 and 600 people in our initial episodes of the new season. Last season, it was probably about 400 to 500. The big variance is if, what happens when we bring BRAC around people in, which is a testing nightmare in and to itself. We had a couple of positive cases in the previous season, but nothing that happened on set. It was typically Labor Day weekend. People went out and partied like it was 1999 and brought things back to us. But you do have to test back into our bubble, and that's usually where we caught them on the way back in. And our protocol there is, I'm the one who gets the call from the laboratory letting me know that there's been a positive. My producer and I do this ourselves. We go off and we pull the person off of set. We do the contact tracing right there. We try to keep it really personal, and we have not had to shut down because we've been able to just get in there and surgically get folks offset and keep moving. And so we've not had to shut down at all through the process. So it's we're really well organized. It's a really great group of folks. This season, I've been working with folks at Sony IT, and we are building an application that we will ultimately distribute to all of the Sony shows for testing and tracking and logging all these people in. You'll get a cute little app on your phone. You can fill out all your demographic information, and that's how we'll do the testing cadences, which for the B group is a once a week thing. For the A group, which is performers, people who work without masks, hair and makeup, but basically anyone who's going to work with the performers, and those people get tested 3 times a week. Sony built a laboratory that's about 500 yards from where I'm sitting, and that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so it's a really high-end lab, and they do an amazing job. We actually are starting next week. We're going to do the testing right on one of our stages, and then it just gets couriered over to the lab a few sound stages away, and then we get the results, and we can scale the results based on actors come first, and people that we're concerned about come first as well. So we can prioritize how quickly we get the results. The baseline is usually we get results in 24 hours. We can get them in an hour if we need to.
Wow.
So it's been a chase for sure, but I feel like we're on top of it.
You actually teed up my next question perfectly, which I was going to ask you, each of you, to describe your the testing protocols, not so much the variance of them, but like, who did you hire? A company? Was it one individual on the smaller places? I know that some of the studios, people report to work the morning of, and they wait in the parking lot for their test result to come in, and then they can report to work. They get paid for that time. I know some people who are on such a cadence that they're 24 hours later, but they've had the prior results. So maybe David, why don't you just elaborate on yours a little bit? It sounds like Sony might have their own in-house, and then I'll go to Jackie.
Sure. Yes, we do have really the productions are kind of free to choose who they want to, but the Biomeme people, who are the folks we work with, came onto the lot last summer and literally built their own laboratory. It's an amazingly accurate, like 99% accurate PCR lab-based test. And so there's a CLIA certified lab here on the lot. And we kind of follow the union guidelines, which is that you need to basically have a negative test 24 hours before reporting to work. The one exception is we can test you Friday for a Monday arrival, so that's 72 hours. But we test everybody. When we first came back this year for the new season, Sony wanted double tests on everybody before they could come back into the bubble, and testing 3 or 4 times a week until we got through all the people who didn't take proper care during the holiday season. And so we tested very aggressively. Fortunately, it was still a pretty small, mostly our construction, art and design, production design people. So it was under 100 people. So that was kind of easily managed, but we were very aggressive testing until things started to settle. And so, but we're fortunate. There are other places you can go. Sony has a place that coordinates literally globally all the testing facilities, and but they do demand that they be lab-based PCR tests. We stopped doing rapid tests this season, both of our own choice and of Sony's choice.
Great. Jackie.
So we, had to morph our testing plan constantly as things kept changing and depending on where we were shooting. So at the beginning, because I think we were pretty early back shooting, there weren't these concierge services set up yet, and we weren't working for a studio that had their own lab or anything. So what we did at the beginning was we found a company that had at-home PCR testings that we shipped to everybody, because we were bringing people to a location that may be coming from 5 different locations. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't, we had to find something that could work for wherever somebody would be. So we shipped the first test out to people and or found local clinics. And again, because if we flew people out at that point in time, it was 72 hours before they got on a flight they had to clear. As time went on, the window got smaller and tests became more available. So at the beginning, we were using these at-home tests where they sent to a lab and they were able to turn around really quickly.
Is that a company like Vault Health? What was the company that you guys?
It was Let's Get Checked.
Let's Get Checked. Okay.
So that is what we did at the beginning. And I was like physically going to FedEx every night, mailing the tests out to crew.
Wow.
Until we got more help, but that lasted for a while. And then we would send other people to clinics, you know, like New York was impossible to get an appointment. So we couldn't do that here, but in other places we could. It all was, and then the turnaround was varied in every location. And so we needed one person just to check turnaround times in each location across the country and the world.
In terms of the COVID protocols, you're saying, like how long?
Yeah, how long? And to be honest, sometimes people, you know, we didn't get the test results back in time because it was a crapshoot. Like you didn't know it back in July if it was going to take 2 days or 5 days. But yes, we use in the network we were shooting for required PCR. We couldn't do rapid tests at all. It had to be a PCR test. And throughout the whole time, it was always PCR. And then as time went on, we still used the Let's Get Checked home tests often because it was just convenient and they got faster and faster with the turnaround. In some clinics, and then concierge services like Saniset we used, and they would go to people's homes, they would go to hotels if we bubbled, and occasionally they came to set.
Do you know the difference in price? So like, you know, we know tests range anywhere, and through the PCR, through the results range anywhere from 60 to 200 a pop. Do you have like an average on what you're spending?
So the Let's Get Checked were 110 at the time, but then remember you got to pay the FedEx to overnight them. On the way out, it was free UPS pickup on the way there. So, and that was about $30, $35. So I would say under 150.
Okay.
The Saniset was over 200.
Wow.
Yes, like 225, I think, if they concierge. So it was a big difference in cost.
Yeah. We have a question for you. Melissa Friedman is working in a small production company and discussing sending out field producers in different states. And I can just add, or different countries, because we send people out to different countries. Is there a mandatory quarantine when they come back to California or any other states that you know of?
So that, I mean, it changes all the time, and you just have to keep following the local government website to find out what it is. I actually have not looked at California in a while, and I'm gonna ask, you guys are all in LA, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm gonna ask you guys. I mean, New York got rid of their quarantine, right? It's a test now.
Yeah.
If you test
I think California is a suggested quarantine, but I don't think they regulate it. Got it. And one other question. It came through an email. Are production companies obligated to test field crews that are going out in a field shoot like 5 days after they come back to their home states to make sure? Did you guys do post shooting tests for your crew members? We
offered them. So we always had one available if they wanted to do it, but it wasn't a mandatory unless they were going back out in the field on another shoot.
Got it. I think that's the right answer, right? The protocols don't mandate it, but we offered it on our unscripted shows too. We had people out of the country, and when they came back in, we sent them either to a clinic and paid for it, and paid for their time, or we sent them a test like the ones you're talking about, just to make sure 3 to 5 days later that they were clear.
Yeah.
Good. And Nikit.
Yeah, in our case, so you know, we had the zoning system implemented, and everyone that was zone A and was sort of around talent primarily was tested 3 times a week, and then most of the rest of the crew was at least once a week, and in some cases twice a week. And it was a combination of the PCR tests. In our case, we sort of really took advantage of the state testing facilities that were available at that time. And I think by then, sort of across California, things were moving quite reasonably in terms of, you know, within 24 hours, you had your results back, and the systems, at least up in San Luis Obispo, were working quite efficiently. So it was quite workable for us to sort of with a small crew stagger who was getting tested when and ensure that we weren't sort of eating into the shooting schedule too heavily. And then alongside the PCR testing, we also used a bunch of serology tests, which did give us a much faster result. And that was testing that was done at the start of each shooting day, with instant and rapid results. And essentially people were then, able to start work immediately after we could clarify that everything was good to go. And again, we sort of staggered the system so that each department was getting tested on alternate days, and it allowed us to just keep a track on the off chance somebody did test positive, to help with isolating things and tracing that back. So it worked very well, I think, for a small crew being able to utilize the state resources and then some of our own testing. I'm not sure that system honestly would make sense on a larger production unless you had a lab working on site or just the facility to do it faster. But I think certainly for smaller productions that aren't necessarily able to get that level of resource, I think this was a very good combination and worked quite effectively for us.
Great. We have a question from the audience about the process for backups. Do you backup crew members? Do you pay them for being on standby? And is it a lesser rate if you're paying them to be on standby? And what does that conversation look like to lock in backups for crew or otherwise? Anyone?
I can tell you what we did. Sorry, Nikit, do you want to go?
No, go for it.
We paid, again, we were non-union in terms of crew. So I know there's different standards for union, which is why the AP Council really wanted to, be a part of these panels, because so many of us work in the non-union space where there's no obligation to, hold up to anything. But we did half-day rate for somebody to get tested, and we actually didn't pay them to be on standby. We sort of took the chance that they would be available if we had to implement them, which was a risk we knew we were taking, but we weighed it out, and knock wood, it worked for us. So we paid them for the test day, and that was it. And the times we did have to pull the trigger on backups, they were available.
Great. And Nikit, do you have anything to?
Yeah, we actually had a relatively similar system. We didn't end up in a position where we sort of needed to call on any of our backups. And so in that sense, all the folks that went up there were the folks that then came back. But yeah, no, it was quite a similar system. And I think the one disadvantage we had was because we were 3 to 4 hours out of LA, just the logistics of getting somebody up to San Luis Obispo and sort of that travel time and how that factored into the production schedule was a bit of a challenge on our end. But no, thankfully we had our entire crew throughout and were able to work with that.
Great. Yasmin, I have a question for you about independent film, and how did you have, or how were you able to produce an independent film in the time of COVID, given that most insurance companies and bond companies are not backing or not covering COVID-related incidents?
So for us, that was a risk we took on. And so we weren't able, as you correctly say, to sort of find an insurance company that covered COVID-related, instances on set. And so it really was, just general liability insurance, and it was a risk we sort of took. The way we worked around it was to really become a lot more detailed and thorough and transparent in the hiring process. And with every single member of the crew that came on, we sort of went through the guidelines and were very clear and sort of said, look, here's how we're going to run the set day to day, and this is exactly what you're signing up for. So everybody that ultimately came on was fully aware that was an inherent risk that they were taking. I think we got quite fortunate at the budget level that we were at, that a bond wasn't required. And any previous work I've done, of course, that's been a necessity. It really was just a situation where, private equity that ultimately funded the film and relationships that existed with those investors meant that there was enough trust on the table, and it was a small enough investment that we were able to make it work. But certainly, yes, once you got into sort of, larger numbers and bigger budgets, I think that would absolutely be something to take into account.
That's fantastic. I know the question's going to come up, so I'm just going to ask it right now. Will you share with us your financier information? No, I'm just kidding.
I will put their information in the chat, and they feel free to call them. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think it's amazing what we've heard, just to also answer it from like hearing inside from the PGA, is that most of the independent productions that have been able to get off the ground really had investors who were willing to, quote unquote, roll the dice, because they felt really confident that the producer had a handle, as much as you can have a handle during a pandemic, on the protocols. And there's actually data, I forgot, I think it might have come from AMPTP, but it literally shows that the entertainment industry, our infection rate, our positivity rate is less than 0.25%. So less than 0.25%. And across the country, it's anywhere from 10% to 20%. So our protocols, when implemented, really work. And so if you're having trouble with I'm sure you're having trouble with insurance, anybody who's doing independent films, but if you go in and show that kind of information to a financier, it might help them a little bit just with you can't guarantee that you're not going to have an incident or you're not going to have to shut down, but at least it'll give them, I'm not sure enough people really know how good our protocols are. And that's a good place to start, by giving them that data. So let's see. So somebody is producing a short film in the UK and have a name that their funding depends on. They're asking what our advice is if their lead actor tests positive before the shoot.
That's a good question. I mean, you have to postpone, I would think, right? If your lead talent, they have funding or not?
They have funding, and it seems like the funding's dependent on that name.
Right. So then they would have to push production until that person clears. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, maybe, or ask the financier if there's a secondary name that they could tag in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think assuming it works with the schedule of the project, and assuming that an investor is comfortable with that delay and what that means financially and otherwise. Certainly, I think it's worth looking at alternative names and just having the sort of B and C plans in place. And I think the other thing I would sort of say is, in a case like that, where the financing is so contingent on the name that's attached to the film, is really trying to sort of keep the investors in the loop a little more, perhaps, than a producer might want to in a normal situation. Yeah. Just so that they don't feel like they're not aware of what's going on, and with constant change, they're fully aware of the process and how it affects them.
That's great. Yeah. I think one of the other questions that everyone, and maybe we'll start with David, is what's an estimate? So you're doing a larger production, and Jackie and Nikit are doing kind of medium and small productions. Is there a good estimate on a good recommendation for the testing? Like what percentage of the budget the testing takes up? Is there any rule of thumb you guys are going on yourselves as producers? And I'm assuming that your recommended testing route is the way you're doing it, but I'd love to know if you've changed your mind after having done these productions. Yeah.
I mean, for our last season, actually, Sony covered all of the COVID expenses just to get us finished with our previous season. This year, we've budgeted based on our experience from last season, and basically created an amort budget that goes over the entire season. It hasn't been. I mean, the testing is the single largest part of it. And especially once we get our larger cast in, and we're doing those folks 3 times a week, it it spikes a lot, obviously, because even with the 200 extras, everybody's got to get tested before they show up here. So that's where it gets a little bit dicier. But honestly, testing has been, I think, our best investment, honestly, because we have done so well and we've been so diligent about the way we're bringing people into our bubble and maintaining that bubble, that folks are willing to come and work with us. And a time, certainly initially last year, people were very skeptical about coming to work. There were a number of people who showed up and were just so frightened by the concept of being out in the real world that they ultimately had to be replaced. So we had a bunch of those. But this season, our reputation has preceded us and folks are happy to come out. And I think, as you mentioned, I've had discussions with various departments as we've ramped up about, should I be working at home if I can, certainly for art and production design and those kinds of folks who can work at home. And I said, we're certainly happy to support that if that's what you'd like. My honest opinion is it's safer here because we have a defined bubble here. Sony screens everybody on the way in. We screen everybody on the way in. So you're going through 2 levels. Our whole crew is, everybody's wristbanded, so we know who everyone is. And I truly think this is a safer place to work than staying at home and going out to Starbucks to get your morning coffee. So to your point earlier, our infection rates are very, very low, and certainly compared to my work in the hospital, where at its worst we were seeing 20 or 30% positives from our tests. Here, not so much, because we're maintaining our bubble, and moreover, we've gotten really good cooperation from cast and crew to behave themselves and to recognize that we can do what we can do here, but their vigilance needs to continue when they leave set. Don't have a really great Friday and then go out with the entire grip team and have a cocktail on your way home. No, go home and close the door behind you and stay that way, because whatever happens over the weekend is going to come back with you on Monday. And our cast and crew have been awesome, really, really awesome about that. So part of my job is just to be that cheerleader and to just see that people are seriously bought into the concept. I attend safety meetings in the morning with the different departments just to sort of remind them of what this all means, and people have listened.
Great. Nikit or Jackie?
Yeah, I'll echo it. I think a lot of what David was saying, in that where we could, I think we really have tried to work virtually, and I think the thing that I found the most challenging, and perhaps was something that we had to sort of adapt to a lot more, was just understanding different crew members' tolerance and comfort levels. And so where one person may be completely okay to meet up and do things in a fairly regular way, someone else may not. And we found that we sort of had to just work with them in that sense. Our entire, for example, our entire wardrobe fittings and costume work during pre-production was done over Zoom calls, which was an incredibly challenging and weird way, I guess, to do that kind of work. But everybody sort of came to the party and adjusted, and we found a way to make it work. So yes, I would agree. Certainly, having a cast and crew that bought into it and was willing to kind of work with us. Certainly, testing was by far the sort of biggest expense. And I think also it was, I found for one of the other things that we sort of had to think a lot about, which is perhaps different for folks who are shooting in Los Angeles, where crew can go home at the end of each day, was also just making sure that mentally and emotionally you're sort of looking after everyone on the weekend. And so we had to take into account that every weekend the production was responsible for organizing certain social activities, or just making sure folks were occupied and able to move around and not feeling like they were sort of trapped for that period of time. But as much as everyone was together that entire period of time, I think it also made production and the work week a lot more efficient. It then allowed everyone to sort of look forward to some time off as well. I think the big thing for me, I think, was just sort of learning and balancing where different people's levels of tolerance were, and how as a producer you sort of have to keep that in mind at the moment, where on a regular shoot in normal circumstances, everyone's there for the work they have to do, and then they go home, and it's not as much of a factor, I would say.
Got
I
it.
think one of the things that worked really well for us, and this is both a union and a studio thing, is in the few times that we've had to send people home as a result of either a positive or more often than not a contact trace, the fact that we are paying them to be quarantined or to be isolated is a huge relief to people, because they're going to be straightforward with you, and they're not going to come back early because, oh my God, I got to work, I have to feed my family. We want you to go home, we want you to quarantine, we want you to be safe, and we want you to come back when you're well, and we're going to pay you for that. And so that's a great relief to people to understand that we're on their side. It's just kind of the right thing to do, and that's really helped people buy into what we're doing and be supportive of us.
Great. We have I think I can answer this question quickly, and then I'm going to go to a bigger question. But so Heidi's asking, so the rapid tests are not good enough even for small indie projects. Our protocols for the indie world, unscripted world, non-union is no, it needs to be a full PCR lab test. They have greater than 90 to 95% efficacy, meaning that they're right 90 to 95% of the time. The rapid tests are down in the 70s or 80s. And you end up with too many people walking through the line that aren't tested, that could walk through and still have COVID-19 and be able to spread it without getting tested. So we do not, the only time we allow a rapid test is if you're doing it in addition to the regular PCR testing, and you're doing a scene where there's kissing or something involved, close contact, and then we will do, just to sometimes have the actors feel better about it, do a quick rapid test before they go into that scene. So that's allowed, but it's only allowed after they've already passed the PCR testing. And then they're asking about the SAG new micro budget contract from December, how it works with the COVID world. The SAG rules for compliance still apply even on the micro budget. So you have to figure out a way to get the testing and the protocols fit within your mini micro budget. Let's see. Maybe, I don't know who can answer this, but they're asking, what are the, this is Bradford Smith, what are the recognized certifications accepted by the industry or the PGA that qualifies someone to be a COVID compliance officer? And he has a small amount of experience working on sets, but a larger amount of experience working with FEMA. So maybe David, do you want to take that one?
And we get asked this a lot. I mean, there are a bunch of online things that you can take. I think I have like 6 or 7 of them that I took just to see. Some of them took me 15 minutes. The course that I took from Johns Hopkins on contact tracing took me 6 days to complete. So there's it's all over the place. I mean, for me, when we're interviewing people to do that position, and in my world, my team is about 14 people here on this show, and I'm looking for people. I mean, the tests are fairly easy, and frankly, everybody who comes onto the show is required to watch the video that the Contract Services has put out there, which all the union people automatically have access to, but Contract Service has made it available to everyone. So it's now a requirement to come onto our set to watch this video. And I think it's actually really, really well done. So if you've seen that, and if you've gone through one of these, say Sets has one, the city has one, that gives you a basic sense of it. The rest of the training, either myself or my team is going to teach you what our expectations are of you. So I haven't made it a necessary prerequisite to come and be a compliance officer as part of our team. I'm expecting them to watch the Contract Services video, to go through the basic, Sony PowerPoint presentations that we use. And then the rest of it is my team just making expectations clear.
And David, is that video only available to people working on productions at your studio, or is that available? Initially it was literally only union people who automatically have access to Contract Services, and then Contract Services opened it up to everyone, to my knowledge. And I don't know if that's a
a global thing or if that's a studio thing that they cut them, cut a deal. But my coordinators now have access to send a link to pretty much anyone on the production union or otherwise. And it's most of the union people who've already taken their required services through contract services come to the party all good to go. But all the non-union people still have to take that, and we just have a link. We send them, they watch it. We're able to track their compliance with that, and nice. it is an expectation of employment.
Do you have easy access to that link, or Diana, can you connect with David and then get that to our next?
Sure, and I'll confirm with them to make sure that it's something that is available to everyone, that it isn't some deal that the studio cut, but it certainly should be, and it's a really well done piece, and I think it's super effective.
I appreciate that, David. Someone else also asked about that report that I was talking about, that we think came from AMPTP. I will also have Diana make sure that becomes available either on our new website. If you guys haven't seen the new website, it's pretty cool. Or another way that you'll have access to it. So we don't have that right now, but we will. Let's see. I'm gonna ask one more. Okay, two things. Anybody use proximity devices on any of your shows? Something that beeps if you're too close to someone else?
We had done a bunch of research on it. Sony's legal people were not particularly happy on the privacy side of it. Yeah. We have done a lot of research. There is an exposure notification that's built into all Android and iPhones, where basically it uses low power Bluetooth and kind of keeps track of who you're around. Should someone test positive, then you have the obligation as a positive case to go back into that app and just say, yeah, I'm positive. And then it anonymously says, hey, Laurie, you've been exposed to a positive case. You should probably get tested. And that seemed like kind of a low res way of doing it. And the legal folks were not comfortable with that. I do know productions, more specifically independent ones, who do wear wrist and proximity devices. I do think it helps. I'd like to think that my people going around and keeping you safely apart and making sure you're wearing the right PPE is the best possible solution.
I've seen people with those, what are they called, noodles that go in the pool. They cut them to 6 feet and they just kind of walk through the crew, making sure everyone's 6 feet apart. For budgets, did you guys have any line items that specifically accounted for any delays if someone in Zone A tested positive?
I mean, we had backup budgeted for every crew. So if someone tested positive, yeah, I mean, yes, it was budgeted.
And what about someone on camera that you've already shot? How did you handle that?
Well, because we were verite following their stories, we had to cancel shoots and then wait till they cleared to shoot with them again.
And did you have budget for holding on that, or how did you handle that?
So to answer, Lori, your question a few minutes ago about budget, like I stick by, particularly in the nonfiction world, 20%, because you need COVID flexibility when shoots cancel and protocols and metrics change. Like our testing started, we were just testing at the beginning of the shoot. By November, when we had the uptick, we were testing every day. And so that initial budget I had for testing, was blown by November when we started testing, but I had enough contingency within the COVID budget just to constantly move money around between testing changing and canceled shoots and backup. And so I'm a believer in 20%.
Got it. And did you guys have any, did any of you work with any actors that are in the older high risk range at all? And did you do anything specific or more extra precautions for them?
I worked with, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jackie.
We worked with a few different vulnerable people, whether it was age or immune deficiencies. And yeah, we had different protocol to deal with that. So we were 12 feet away from them instead of 8 feet. Our standard was 8 feet. We were 12 feet away from them. We wore gowns and booties. So we had stricter protocol around vulnerable people for sure.
And Nikit?
Yeah, no, it was much the same with us. We had about 3 or so of our cast that was in the older demographic and was immunocompromised, and it was much stricter in terms of the regulations. It was certainly more than the 6 feet, and I think a lot of it beforehand was just sort of having, again, a very honest conversation with them and saying, look, what can we do to make it comfortable for you, and what are perhaps the requirements that you're going to have. You know, a lot of them wanted to eat separately. They wanted their food prepared a certain way. They sort of needed certain things to work differently, perhaps from the way the rest of the team would have. And it was just a case of making sure that those things were kind of enforced, and that they were sort of made to feel comfortable. But yes, it was just a little bit extra on top of everything that we were already doing.
And what about working with minors? Anything different?
So we didn't have any minors on this particular shoot. Yeah, nothing that I can add to that, unfortunately.
We shot with minors, but they pretty much had the same testing protocol and PPE protocol that everyone else did if they were over the age of 2. So they had to be tested if they were over 2, else they couldn't be on our set.
Great. Okay. That's fantastic. So here's an interesting question. So someone's asking, did any crew ask for hazard pay? On my shows, everyone was just happy to have a job. I don't know about you guys.
We definitely got asked about it. The production company I was working for, didn't comply, and we were able to find crew without it. Yeah.
Great.
We were asked as well, and unfortunately just weren't able to sort of offer it. But I think it was much the same as you're saying, Laurie. We found in the end that it was a lot of people were just happy to be able to get out of LA and work. And in our case, that actually worked to our favor.
Great. Donovan's asking if there's a process for bringing a crew member back on set who's overcome COVID. Can they come back on set?
So the answer is yes. And basically, our protocol is that you're allowed to come back after an infection. The timer starts at 10 days from when symptoms started. And so then after that 10 days has elapsed, it's my call to bring them back unless they're high up on the cast list, in which case it has to be me and somebody from Sony's health office has to sign off on it. But basically 10 days post symptoms, and then they have to be basically asymptomatic, although the whole taste and smell thing seems to be residual frequently, but asymptomatic, afebrile without the aid of Tylenol or Motrin, so no fever for at least 24 hours, and I think the words we use are that you are physically capable of doing your job without being fatigued, I think is how they put it, which is to say, if you're a grip who is, having to do heavy lifting and you're just coming off of this and a regular day's work is going to just knock you over, then no, I would prefer that you not be back. And then from there, we put you on a different testing regimen because people who are post-infection typically test positive again. And so we'll test you. If you test positive again, you get a moratorium from Cadence for 30 days. Then we test you again. If you're positive again, you get another 30 days. If you're positive again after 60 days, on the 90th day, if you test positive, then we're going to send you off to a physician to get a note that says, he or she is still okay. So that's the regimen. But yes, absolutely. And at this particular moment in history, we are seeing a lot of post-positive who are coming back, and some of them are unfortunately having trouble finding work. Not so much the case here because we do have the protocols for it, and we do understand. And I would say probably in the past month or two, I think we've employed probably 10 or 15 people who are post-infection.
Right. Did you guys have to up kit rentals or add remote stipends for people that were working from home? I know editors are working from home now. Did you guys notice a kit rental fee going up or anything like that? Anyone?
Not in our case, no. I think in the way that we sort of structured everything, we had been pretty clear about just quite simply not being able to afford that in most cases. I have seen in other situations though that folks are sort of asking that now becomes a part of the arrangement. But yeah, in our case, I think again it just came down to being very clear about where we could budge and where we couldn't, far more so than you normally would, and really just allowing anyone that wasn't comfortable with that to take a step back if it didn't work for them.
I can say that the Producers Guild protocols, because we're always looking at it from keeping our crew happy, suggests that they have conversations with anyone who is working remotely, make sure that they have the bandwidth they need, the computers that they need, and make a deal per crew member to make sure that everyone is, is completely happy. It's only going to help you in the long run. If someone has bad, Wi-Fi connection, it's not going to help you in the long run. Anyone else have anything specific about that? David, it sounds like you don't have very many remote folks.
I think at the most, again, because we're just ramping up to production for this next season now. I think that similar to others on the panel, I mean, costumes and design and set design folks and art people have been working remotely. Some of the obviously folks who are doing props and things. I mean, everybody who wants to certainly has the option. I can't really speak to whether or not we're paying them kit fees to do so, but we've certainly offered it to everyone. We want everyone to feel comfortable in this world, but I don't know. It's actually a fairly small percentage. Most folks are pretty happy to come here because they know it's an insular and protected environment.
Yeah.
In our,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Jackie.
We were completely fully remote, but we did not offer kit fees to anybody. Like even our editors were remote, and I'm an advocate. I think if editors are working on their own equipment at home, there should be a stipend.
Right.
Unfortunately, yeah, we didn't offer that.
We pay for the normal. Hans was asking, aren't you paying for post equipment in a non-pandemic? So we are paying for the normal things we would pay if an editor's working remotely anyway. The question I think was really geared, are you adding an additional stipend for people who are forced to work from home? Like in the olden days, a year ago, it was a luxury for an editor to say, hey, I want to work from home, and they thought it was a good thing. And now that people are forced to work from home, there's a different questions being asked, which is, are we going to get compensated for our own bandwidth and things like that? So I think that you'll have to take it on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to try to get 3 more questions in quickly. Masks are still going to be required post-vaccine. Let me just give you kind of the general, what we're all talking about in terms of vaccinations. I think I wrote this down somewhere, the exact wording. Let me just see if I can get to it. So if you want to, as a producer, have a mandatory vaccination policy in order to be employed on your production, we don't believe that it will be coming from the unions that you have to do that. But if you are interested in that, it's going to first have to be once vaccinations are available to everyone who wants to get them. And then our suggestion is that you go to SAG and say, we want to do this production. We want to require vaccinations unless someone has a religious or health reason that they can't. And how can we work that out? So that right now looks like it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But until vaccinations until we have herd immunity in whatever place that we're shooting, and in particular herd immunity within your own crew, all these protocols are going to need to stay in place. That's what we've basically heard. There's nothing that's been out there that's been published, but those are the conversations that are happening. And by the way, I just want to point out quickly that Diana has put up those results from AMPTP that I told you about, the less than 0.25%. So if you grab them out of the chat before we close you out here, that's good. And then this chat will be available on PGA's YouTube channel, and that link is there as well. Thank you, Michelle. So one of the other questions, and then I'm going to ask you guys to share something that you learned from your time of shooting during COVID. But the one question that I think is interesting is, do you have any advice for a producer working on a very independent film where you feel occasionally unsupported by the person that's above you, whether that's an executive producer or a producer or the studio exec? It's probably not a studio exec if it's a very, very, very indie project, but like, what could you do if you're a producer and you feel like, wow, it feels like there should be more more safety measures put in place? What would be your guys' suggestions?
You know, I mean, the safety part of it is, I mean, in order for people to do their best work, I had a conversation with one of our lead actresses when we very first started back in August of last year, finishing up on the previous season. And her point to me was, you know, unless I'm comfortable, I can't get into character. I can't perform in the way that you're hoping me to perform if I don't feel safe, if I don't feel like we're all on the same page here. So, you know, I think there's both the quality of what you're going to end up with on the screen, and just, you know, an appropriate behavior is it's your obligation as a producer to make these people feel safe in their own environments, or you're not going to get the product that you're looking for, whether it's a grip or your lead actor. So I don't know that I would encourage working on a place where folks are not taking it seriously, because it's you know, I can tell you from my hospital life, it's really serious, and it can be really serious. Fortunately, our numbers are going down and we're making progress. We still have a really long way to go, and I've been fortunate because of my hospital work. I've been vaccinated since like December. And but we have a really, really long way to go, and we're all going to be masking, and we're all going to be distancing for the foreseeable future. And I don't find that there's any excuse that anybody above the line, below the line, PA or exec should be risking the life and health of anybody that they're working with. I just personally would not want to be on that set.
Amen.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think probably now more so than ever, it's really about getting very clear with what you're comfortable with and where you draw a line, in a sense. And I think you know, that there's absolutely, now is the time to be a little louder about that, and to be a little more defined about it. And if it isn't working and it doesn't feel safe, or it doesn't feel to a level that makes you or those around you comfortable, then I agree that that's something that, you know, you really do have to ask yourself about. I think there is an element, certainly what I've found as a producer, is that especially when you're working on smaller things where you don't have as many resources, it is also about finding somewhat of a balance as to how can you understand where the other side might be coming from, or where can you perhaps meet in the middle a little bit, you know, but never at the expense or at taking a risk that is not worth taking. So I think this is just one of those black or white things, unfortunately.
If I could add, Jackie, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, I mean, sort of along the same lines is that, yeah, just as a producer, line producer, production manager, make sure you create this safe space where everybody feels comfortable about speaking up about their comfortability, and giving them the space to sit a shoot out if they don't believe that it should be shooting, which I did on a few occasions on my series. Like, just, yeah, listen to your crew, listen to your team and your staff, and give them the space to speak up.
I would just add to all of that, because those are all really important answers, is that the producing community is a really great fellowship. So especially if you're a member of the PGA, if you're a member of the PGA and you find out whoever you're reporting to that doesn't seem to be taking it seriously, if you find out like who they know in this business and call someone from the PGA and say, hey, I'm having this experience, what's your advice? They will help, because none of us want those numbers to go up, especially in the entertainment industry. We all want to get back to work. And as David said, I do not see us going back to what we would call normal in our business in the next year. So this is something we all have to commit to for the long term until we have a much better handle on the virus, and also more people being vaccinated. So I know we're going way over, but I just would love for you guys to let me know if you found any silver lining in what you've done, in how you've put in these protocols. What's the best thing that's come out of this for each of you?
I think that the fact that, you know, we've come a long way from, you know, where we were when I started doing this back in August, and I'm encouraged by encouraged by the change in human nature that people really do want to work with each other. And it's I mean, on a really large crew like this, to get everybody on the same page and to literally be watching each other's back and to kind of nudging them back if they're over your shoulder when they don't need to be, or for asking for help. You know, I don't feel comfortable. How can I change this? It's been an amazingly great esprit de corps. And I mean, that's one of the sort of the common things between my two lives, between my production life and my hospital life, is working together towards a common goal. And it's a real pleasure to see this play out in the healthcare scenario on set, on stage, to see how much people care about each other and how they take care of each other. And I think it is why we've been successful. It's why our numbers are low, is because we work well together and we care about each other. But it's shown a really bright light on what a great industry this is to work in.
I think for me, it's two things. It's one is that constraints force creativity, right? So especially in the nonfiction world, a lot of times the creatives couldn't shoot what they wanted because we couldn't go somewhere. They had to stay outside, for instance, right? And it really forces people to be innovative. So I think that's one of the things. We got super creative and innovative in this time. And the other thing that, because we're perfectionists as producers and we want to do everything perfect all the time. And I think COVID taught me that no plan is 100%, no plan. You can blow holes in every single COVID plan. I did it on every plan we did, right? So the only thing we could do during COVID was just to lower the risk of infection, as much as possible. So it's sort of accepting the fact that it's not going to be 100%. So those were like the two things I learned.
Great.
I think for me, the biggest thing, I'd like to believe that it has made me sort of a lot more, or rather, it has allowed me to approach my work as a producer with a lot more empathy than before. And I think, you know, of course, so much of our job is kind of understanding the needs of others and creating an environment in which a team can do their best work. But now more than ever, really, so much of it has been about putting somebody else's needs and putting the needs of a crew and a team, you know, sometimes even before the needs of a project and a story. And I really do hope that aspect of the work and just being everybody on the crew from the producer down, really being just that little bit more compassionate, that little bit more understanding of what somebody else is going through and how the sort of bigger picture from a health and safety perspective affects somebody else outside of yourself. I really do hope that's something that we sort of carry forward, because it certainly comes through in the work and it makes the work a lot more fun as well.
That's so well said, Nikit. Leah Queen also echoes that, saying, you know, it looks like COVID has forced us to really look at the safety of our crew, and hopefully that piece of it will not go away once we're 5 years down the line and not having to think about a pandemic, but certainly putting safety of our crew and cast as the primary goal. And then getting the film made or the project made is a good thing to have come out of it. So thank you for leaving us with that, Nikit. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, David and Nikit, for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sorry to go over, but I really appreciate you. And Nikit, go to sleep now. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.